Shalom. Welcome, beloved, to Grace and Truth Ministries on the Mr. Blacktastic channel. I am Brother Isaiah, also known as Yeshaya. I'm a born-again believer of Adonai Yeshua Mashiach, who is also known as the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe in the scriptures of the Holy Bible as the infallible testimony of Yah, and that Yeshua Mashiach is the only begotten Son of Yah, who came into the world as a man by miraculous incarnation of the Holy Spirit to redeem lost humanity from sin. I fully believe Yeshua is both Lord and God, according to the Holy Scriptures that declare he was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory, and that also say, for in him the whole fullness of deity, the Godhead, dwells bodily. The focus of this ministry is salvation in Yeshua the Messiah unto all people, according to the gospel of the kingdom of Yah. I do not tolerate racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, racial supremacy doctrines, nor those attitudes. It is my sincere prayer that through the Holy Spirit, I may serve as a prophetic voice to all in need of salvation through the gospel of Yeshua Mashiach, according to the Holy Scriptures. On this platform, I will be teaching scripture, history, and discussing relevant issues. I pray you receive insight, inspiration, and faith by the word of Yahweh in the name of Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach. So, greetings to those of you that have gathered here with us. I see some wonderful people that have joined us here in the chat. My dearly beloved sister, Denise Jones, bless you, beloved. Tracy Michelle, bless you, beloved. Regina, bless you. And I see my sister Naomi also joining us. Bless you, beloved. Good to see you all with us. And for everyone else that may be joining us silently from wherever you may be, we say greetings and shalom unto you. So today we're going to get right into our topic for today. So this is from a series that we pick up and do every now and then called Lights, Camera, Reactions, in which we'll be showing a few videos to give some reaction and commentary to it. All of these things are protected by fair use. And I got to make sure let me make sure, since I will post the banner because we know that, you can have people will file for copyright infringement and things of this sort on some of these videos. And that's why we have to do it in a reactionary way or in the reaction way, because we are giving commentary to these things. So it is for that particular purpose. All right. So when some creators make other videos, then, you're supposed to make sure you state that's the reason for which you're using them. All right. So we're going to make sure that we do that. So I want to say to everyone again, shalom to all of you. All right. And if anyone would like to email us, of course, the email address is in the description, as well as if you'd like to donate, you can do that as well. So there's the email address at that's mr.blacktastic, BLAKTASTIC @hotmail.com. All right. And you can also donate to the various options that we have available, either through Cash App or PayPal. All right. And we'd be more than happy to receive your donation and do the best that we can with it to help further the advancement of the kingdom of God. All right. So let's get into it. Let me just say a few things before we get into it, because, I know we've done some videos that, to me, they're not controversial. They're just necessary, such as the videos we did about debunking recently the book of Yashar. And I took clips out of that video and then reposted them, which some people have seen who are not regulars here to the channel. But to all of those who may be tapped in for a moment and you're listening, either because you now become a listener, a regular subscriber, and I'm certainly glad and happy for that. And I thank you and appreciate you for your subscription. Or to some people that are just sticking around because they hoping to see what next will he say that I don't like that's controversial. And I thank you too for just sticking around and giving us a view. But let me make this clear to you all. I'm not like some people on the channel who just let you say whatever you want to say. Some of you guys, especially from the Israelite community, you want to post a whole chapter of the Bible, then give a whole commentary on that, then post another chapter of the Bible, and then give your soliloquy and haiku. And I'm not reading all of that. I'm just telling you that right now. This channel is not here for you to come and preach and teach to me. No, it's here for me to preach and teach to those that are listening. And I'm not going to be caught up in no brouhaha or back and forth with a lot of y'all that want to write these books, basically, in the comment section. I'm just going to save time and money and delete your comments. You know why? Because I ain't going to be bothered with all that. I ain't got time for that. I ain't going back and forth with you. And so I'm telling you in advance, don't waste your time putting all that nonsense that we are debunking and knocking down. Besides that, y'all never say nothing different. You just like people that don't know how to paint, but you always walk around with a paint can splashing it on the wall, thinking that, oh, see, get the picture now? I threw that red up there. Now you can see. Now you won't, brother. No. You still don't know what you're talking about, and you're still not making any sense. And some of you all are not very good listeners. You don't listen well. You don't listen analytically because you listen with a blocked mind and a blocked conscience. You only see things one way. And that's why you're not good students when it comes to learning the scriptures. Because you are got a one way of doing everything and listening to everything. And you can't learn like that. And I'm not going to be bothered with you. Now, if I see somebody that's got a genuinely humble character and want to have a discussion or then I may converse with them. But if y'all really want to get at me with these long, drawn-out comments, man, just email me, and I may respond to you. But if you keep coming in my comment section, then I just realize, you know what? Y'all can call it trolling or whatever it is. I call it wasting your time. I'm just going to delete because I'm not putting my videos out there and my comments in my community section for y'all to come and leave this whole half page of book. That's the same thing the last dude with a made-up Hebrew name said, and the dude before that, and all these other dudes with made-up screen names said, because y'all in y'all feelings. Go get therapy, eat more fiber, cry to your mama, go to story time at the public library, do whatever you got to do to get through it and get over it. But there's a lot of other people, that channels you can go to on YouTube and watch that will tell you exactly what you want to hear. But the reason you came here is because you knew I wasn't going to do that, and you wanted to hear what I had to say. And if you can't handle it, then don't come here. It's just that plain and simple. I'm not going to switch up and change because you all of a sudden with your, unknown name and made up name, a screen name or whatnot, jump on my page and I'm going to wake this brother up. No, you're not. You snoring so loud you can't hear yourself because you're sleepwalking, and you're coming to my page and I'm ringing the alarm and you still won't wake up. But you got something you want to tell me. You ain't got nothing to tell me. Hush your lips and be quiet and listen to the teaching. And if you genuinely have something to say, then email me. All right? Because I'm cutting off all them long, drawn out, ridiculous comments where y'all just say the same thing y'all heard on this dude channel, on that dude channel, and that dude channel, and the same old raggedy stuff. Y'all wasn't good Sunday school students when you was in church. You wasn't good church attendees, but now all of a sudden you woke up one morning and somebody told you you was a Hebrew and you the high priest of Israel. Man, if you don't go sit down somewhere, nobody got time for that. You woke up one morning, I'm a prophet. Don't even know Jesus well. It's just ridiculous. No vetting process, where people can vouch for your character or anything. But now you know the whole Bible from Genesis to maps. And you go around from YouTube channel to YouTube channel trying to argue and debate with somebody. I ain't doing it with y'all. So waste your time if you want to. I got the power of delete, boop. I ain't even got to say nothing. I just hit that button. Delete, boop, gone. Why? Because I'm not going to read your nonsense. You trying to get an audience on my video where I already got an audience. If you want to have a real conversation, email me. I'll talk to you honestly. I may even exchange numbers with you and talk to you some more. But if you start talking that nonsense, man, I'm going to hang up on you as fast as people do when they cut your phone off for not paying the bill. Do. It's going to be over. Because I'm too old for the foolishness. I ain't got no more time to suffer with the foolishness of folks that just woke up yesterday talking about, I'm woke now since I've been in the truth. Get out of here. I done studied this Bible, man, for more than half my life. And since childhood. And you think I'm going to listen to you? Man, you better put them Nikes on and just do it. Get out of my face and walk on. No, we're not doing that. So that's my rant for the day. Okay. So, and shalom. I see my sister Shan joining us, my brother the Orthodox Moore. Bless you, my man. And I don't care if people say, oh, man, you being arrogant. You need to be humble, brother. No, I don't need to be humble to you. That's the only reason why a lot of these folks will tell you so, be humble, bro. They tell you to be humble when you don't want to listen to them, but they don't want to be humble and listen to you. They don't want to exercise the brain that God gave them, and be humble and learn how to actually listen. They start arguing even before you finish the sentence. And these are kind of trifling and trying folks that died in the wilderness and didn't make it into the promised land. They still exist today. And these same group of folks, unless they change, they're not going to make it into the promised land. They're not going to make it. Too obstinate, too bitter. Folks go to school to argue with the teacher. Don't know nothing about the subject, but want to tell the teacher how to teach. Go to church and argue with the preacher. And then talking about some be humble, be respectful. And they the least humble people walking the face of the planet. Man, get out of here. So in any event, we're going to do some reaction videos today. And I got some good ones planned here. Some is going to be historical. We're going to look at the life of Sarah Baartman, who some of you may be familiar with and have heard of, but she was the Black lady that had that very voluptuous shape that was made very famous. And there's some details about her life, man, that I really want you to hear because it has something to say or do. Well, let me say it like this. Some of the way she was exploited I think if more people knew her story, with all the things we have going on in our world today with these BBLs and all these other things like this, it would hopefully it would make people take a different perspective just on themselves and beauty and things of this sort, and start doing things more naturally instead of trying to get surgeries and all these other kinds of things. Because some of the stuff about her, some of the details about her life will make you cry. This woman didn't even get the respect she deserved in life, even in her death. And we're going to look at that. And we're going to also look at some commentary on modern Black culture. All right. And so I got some videos lined up for that. But the first video that I'm going to start out with is going to be from a gentleman by the name of the Chinese historian. And he actually has some pretty interesting commentary. He currently lives in Canada, but he is Chinese. But he has some pretty insightful commentary. And understand, too, the opinions being expressed in these videos are not all mine. I don't necessarily agree or share them, but I'm allowing them for the sake of conversation. All right. And you feel free to comment freely, in the chat. And we'll maybe try to post your comments or address some questions or concerns you have. I had even thought to myself, maybe I should put the link out there and see if anybody wants to actually say anything. But y'all let me know, what y'all think. All right. And so the first video that we're going to look at again is this brother from the Chinese historian, and he's talking about the media influence and how it's shaping America to the point where he thinks it's going to bring the downfall or destruction of America. And he may very well have a point. So let's take a look and see what he has to say. All right. So let me make sure I get my face on there. There we go. Y'all see me at the bottom? All right. So let's start this up. And you all tell me if you can hear this real well. All right.
Happy birthday, America. So tomorrow you're going to be 248 years old. Okay, you have been through a lot as a country. Most people throughout the world, they refer to America as the leader of the free world, the #1 nation on earth, the country with the most freedom for its citizens, a country built on democracy. What if I told you that America is a nation that's falling to pieces? What if I told you that woke Marxist media indoctrination is destroying this country from inside out? Let me give you some examples.
Let me pause that real quick. Can you all hear this? If you can hear it good, give me a 1 in the chat. All right. Since Naomi said not really well. Let me see. Let me see something. Maybe because I got too many things running at the same time. Let me try something. Let me try something, y'all. Tracy says she can hear it real good. All right, now, Sister Naomi, you girl, you might have some janky speakers in now, girl. I'm just messing with you. But let's see if we can. I want to make sure everybody can hear this really well. All right. So Tracy said her earbuds, it was okay. All right, let me start it again. All right, and Sister Naomi, I told you, girl, don't be buying them speakers down at the taco stand, from that guy with the little cart now. Don't y'all be doing it. Shoot, I bought me some headphones down at the taco stand. They work real good. I'm just messing. Okay, let's start it over. Let's see what happens. Y'all give me a 1 if you can hear it real good. All right, and a 2 if you can.
Happy birthday, America. So tomorrow you're going to be 248 years old. Okay, you have been through a lot as a country. Most people throughout the world, they refer to America as the leader of the free world, the #1 nation on earth, a country with the most freedom for its citizens, a country built on democracy. What if I told you that America is a nation that's falling to pieces? What if I told you that woke Marxist media indoctrination is destroying this country from inside out? Let me give you some examples. Who is Tony Tempah? Any of you guys ever heard of Tony Tempah? Okay, I bet you haven't. Do you know why? Tony Tempah is a police applied excess force during his arrest. However, every single mainstream media news outlet has censored this story. Do you guys want to know why? Because Tony Timpa is a heterosexual white male, so every single news source censored the murder of Tony Timpa. Isn't that quite interesting? Okay, I have another question. Okay, and while seeing the issue at the border, I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, along with Alejandro Mayorkas, they've let in something like 10 million illegal aliens into the United States, right? I have a question for you. How many illegal aliens did Barack Obama deport during his 8 years of presidency? Do any of you guys know?
Now, this is a good question right here, because the point that he's driving at is how the media machine pumps the statistics to you that they want you to have while withholding other statistics that they don't want you to have, depending on who's in office or who's in power. And if you've noticed something, in America in particular, the biggest pushers of anything race-based has actually been the news media. And the way things have been tilted and slanted in our era, or in our day and time rather, is really, I would say, the media is doing more to create a race war than the few white supremacists that they catch, or black revolutionaries that they catch with guns and weapons that claim they want to go out and kill and shoot people and start a race war. Because think about it. What are a lot of these people using, just from a psychological perspective, to make themselves feel like, oh, we need to go out and do this? Those people oftentimes are influenced by the media itself, because of the constant images that you're seeing pumped to you on all these different avenues of television or internet entertainment that we now have available to us. And one of the tragedies of our generation is that reality TV is number one. There's very little creativity anymore put into making television shows that can either entertain or educate. And that's because people realize that mess sells. So you put the most messiest thing on there, and you put all these different things on there, and then you let everybody get a chance to have the microphone and give their commentary, and you see the worst of people being promoted and pumped all the time. And one group can take video images or an incident and make another group look a certain way, or individuals look a certain way, and this goes back and forth and back and forth. And so the media that we have available to us today is just as responsible. It may not have, the media personalities may not have picked up a gun or threw a bomb or any of those things, but what were they sending out? What messages were they sending out? Think about it. This is why sometimes when there's an investigation or a crime has been committed, the police don't give the information to the media right away. Why? Because they want to make a story. They care more about making the story than actually having the crime solved or the person helped. And they would tip off the criminals or the people that need to be arrested, or they would jeopardize or put people in jeopardy of their life. I saw a gentleman here in Georgia a few months back. He won the lottery, and he went down to the lottery to claim his earnings with his face. He was so covered up you couldn't even tell what color he was, because it's apparent to him, and obviously anybody else that pays attention, certain information should not be let out. That's why I'm glad they passed a law down here that they won't release people's information. But there's always somebody trying to creep and crawl and trying to find out. But here's interesting. When it comes to politicians, you find out just how political the media is, especially certain news channels are tilted a certain way, either to the left or to the right. And when they want to make somebody a superstar like Barack Obama, you never hear the things that he did that wouldn't be popular to the general public. You only hear about the fluff and stuff. All right? So listen at this.
I may know if you guys know, because it was never reported on the news. Barack Obama was known in Mexico and Latin America as the king of deporters. By the way, that's the right decision. Okay? Barack Obama in 8 years deported 3 million illegal aliens. How many did Trump deport? Okay, any of you guys know? Trump in 4 years deported roughly 800,000. How interesting is that? Barack Obama, 8 years deported 3 million. Trump deports 800,000 in 4 years. Everybody loses their mind in the mainstream media. Everybody calls him a racist, an Islamophobe. okay, a transphobe, a misogynist, a dictator, a Hitler wannabe. No, I found that to be quite interesting. I have another question for you guys. Which U.S. president absolutely bombed the shit out of the Middle East? Which U.S. president dropped the most ammunitions in a single calendar year? Who do you guys think it is? Is it George Bush? Is it Lyndon B. Johnson? No, it's Barack Obama.
Now, let's stop right there, because for a lot of people, especially Black Americans, bringing out these facts almost seems like it's blasphemous. It's almost like talking about Jesus or talking about Muhammad in the wrong way. Because some of the people here, some of Black people here in this country, and some white people too, to a certain extent, worship the Obamas even to this day. You can go on the internet right now to your social media account, and you're still going to find people with the Obamas as their profile picture. You'll still find a lot of women swooning and doting over Obama as if he's their dream man, knowing the good and well that he's married to Michelle. You see people with pictures of Michelle and the girls, all posted up as if that's their dream ideal of a family. Now, I'm not saying that, on a personal level that they're terrible people, but what I'm saying is the image or picture or portrait that we've been painted oftentimes isn't true to form. And a lot of Black people after the fact were mad because they expected Barack Obama to do more. And the problem that I have with that is Black folks need to learn the politics game. We expect Black politicians to go to Washington, D.C. or to our state capitals and just hook us up. That's what we say in the neighborhood. Hook a brother up. No, you have to give politicians an agenda and make them work. There are no hookups when it comes to government, when it comes to politics. You use your voting strength based on your numbers, and you use your economic stability, if you have it, which Black folks unfortunately don't, even though we're the greatest consumers, which we should have it, but it's because we don't get together to do anything with it. But this is what other communities do. They use their economic leverage to force politicians to work for them. They give them an agenda. They send them into office with marching papers. And when you don't do that with a politician, what happens is they give you orders rather than you giving them orders. And so what did we ask Barack Obama to do for Black folks? Nothing. Just look good and give us great photo ops. And that's exactly why people got all them pictures of Obama. That's what they got. They got him talking about Pookie and Ray Ray and thought it was funny when he was patronizing us. They got all of the other little sound bites, him dropping the mic. That meme is out there. Him singing songs. People talking about, oh, how handsome he is. Oh, he's such a great basketball player. Oh, he's so tall. And, oh, he's so athletic. And, oh, look how beautiful Michelle is. And we were defending them against all the racial slander they were getting. But we got distracted from what he was supposed to be doing. So when he started doing things for the LGBTQ community, people start calling him, the gay president and all these other types of things, and try to start saying, well, he wasn't the first Black president, Bill Clinton was, and all that crap. But the truth of the matter is the LGBTQ community gave Barack Obama an agenda, and they leveraged their resources to force him to adhere to that agenda. And that's why he catered to them. Now, you can make him out to be the Antichrist nephew and all the other kind of stuff, and as evil as you want him to be. But again, politicians for the people with power are pawns. And for the people without power, you become the pawn of the politicians. So you got to learn how to play the game, or you're going to always be on the losing end. And Barack Obama got in office, and he did what any white president would have done. He did politics. And based on the time that we're at in history, he did it the way that they always do it. His Blackness had nothing to do with it. Let's keep listening.
Barack Obama absolutely bumped the the shit out of the Middle East. I mentioned in previous videos before, obviously there's an issue in the Islamic world, but I can guarantee you this, 80% of their problems comes directly from the United States. You know, people in the West always tell you guys, oh, you know, how great we are as a society. You know, we built the best civilization in the world, the most advanced civilization in the world, the wealthiest civilization in the world. That's why everybody in the world wants to come here. Okay, I have another question for you. So you acknowledge all of these accomplishments, right? No, I agree. The West did a lot of amazing things, okay? But are you guys also going to take accountability for what happened in the past? The Vietnam War, dropping napalms on innocent civilians, spraying Agent Orange, causing fish skin, causing cancer, causing genetic mutations on local Vietnamese women and children, My Lai massacre, absolute zero accountability. What happened in Laos? What happened in Cambodia? Nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, of Nagasaki, covert operations. Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected president of Congo, he was assassinated by the CIA.
Now let's stop right there. Patrice Lumumba. How many of you have heard of Patrice Lumumba? Lumumba was somebody that was held in high regard by a lot of your Black civil rights leaders here. And he was one of the guys who helped spearhead a lot of the decolonization of a lot of the African countries. And whether you know it or not, he was an enemy of the Western powers, of Great Britain, of France, of the United States. They all wanted him out, you know, and they end up using his successor to get him out. And this is that divide and conquer thing that Western powers have been doing for a long time. Introduce things into your community or to the midst of you to try to get you to turn inward on each other while also promising you gifts and trinkets. There's always been sellouts. I think people, though, oftentimes aren't aware of just how up the sellouts go. Because he got sold out by those within his own government who sold out to other powers so that they could get rid of him. So I thought that was an interesting fact that he brought up. You know, and he's bringing up really the hypocrisy of the U.S., Britain, France, Europe, even Canada, where he's at, and other Western powers, how they throw a rock and hide their hand. And now how the media is being used as the greatest weapon to try and sway public opinion and further do the same damage to society as a whole as they did to people like Patrice Lumumba and others through massacres and murder. It's just conditioning people.
Under the orders of Dulles. No accountability. The war in Syria, the war in Afghanistan, let
me stop it again. Because he said Allen Dulles. And let me rewind that part. Dulles Airport, where people fly into, is named after the CIA director that's behind the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Now you see what happens? People who commit this type of political murder or atrocities, or who lead these genocidal agendas, they get monuments and airports and colleges and libraries named after them. But what's named after Patrice Lumumba? What's named after him? This is the kind of stuff that goes on in our country. We doing exactly what the Bible says, calling the evil good and the good evil. This is what people are doing in the world.
Assassinated by the CIA under the orders of Allen Dulles. No accountability. The war in Syria, the war in Afghanistan, invasion of Iraq in 2003, killing between 1 to 2 million innocent Iraqi civilians. Okay, where are the weapons of mass destruction? Has anybody found them yet? Are you guys also going to take accountability for what happened in Iraq? See, every time that you bring up these war crimes, you know, slavery, colonization, all of these things that happened, okay? These people from the West, they will tell you that, oh, these things happen worldwide, everywhere. See, you can't have this double standard, okay? If you want the rest of the world to acknowledge you for all of your accomplishments, then you also must face consequences of all of your war crimes. Okay, there's no double standard in this. Okay, let me ask you another question. People keep saying that America is a democracy. Okay, first of all, America is not a democracy because in a democracy, the majority rules, right? So if 95% of the population they don't want this insane 2S LGBTQNAI plus agenda to be pushed in the mainstream media and in your public education systems. How come this agenda is everywhere in our society? It's being shoved in our faces every single day.
Now that is a great point, because that's another thing. The minorities who, again, know how to lobby and leverage, use their leverage rather with their economics to dictate politics, usually dictate to the majority. The alphabet community, as we often call them, is a minority within a minority. They're very small, but they project themselves as being very big, and you see their influence being very powerful. Why is such a small group seeming to have their agenda take priority over so many others? And that's exactly right, Kendrick. We are a republic. And he's going to bring that out. And there's some good things to that I won't go into as to why we should probably be a republic and not a true democracy. Because one of the aspects of a democracy, majority rule means that things would be even more far left than they currently are. And that's because the majority of this country is actually more liberal than conservative, or in the middle or balanced. And so there's a lot of things that can happen. So there are some checks and balances that come with a republic, but he makes some great points here about the democratic process and how this country isn't truly a democracy. And even the Democratic Party, they aren't truly as democratic as they portray themselves to be. They favor only their constituents, even at the cost of compromising the freedom of other people. And that's what you see being pushed in our country. Let's listen to what he has to say.
In a democracy, shouldn't the majority rule? This is where many people are wrong. America is not a democracy. For example, what if, let's say, you're leading a tiny village of maybe 1,000 people, and let's just say, for example, all 1,000 of these people, they're white supremacists, okay? And a black family moves in and opens up a little bakery, okay? They want to make a living. They want to be able to feed their children, okay? However, these 1,000 white supremacists, they have a vote at the city council. They say that, you know what? Why don't we just murder this black family that moved in because we don't want them in our community? See, if America was a democracy where the majority rules, this innocent black family would simply be murdered. So it is because of this, America had to make some changes. America is a constitutional republic. Okay, it is because of scenarios like this, America had to add the Constitution to their legal system. So remember that America is not a democracy; it is a constitutional republic. How come schools and mainstream media don't teach this? And in America, you keep talking about you have diversity, you have equity, you have inclusion, you have all these amazing programs in place. You have affirmative action. Okay, I have a question for you. Okay, he keeps saying that we need more black representation. We need especially women of color. If you want more black women so bad, why don't you invite Candace Owens to speak at the White House? Why don't you hire Candace Owens as a guest speaker on CNN or MSNBC or NBC News? Oh, she's...
Well, now let me say this, because I knew that's going to strike a nerve with some people. Everybody doesn't like Candace Owens. I'm not necessarily a fan of any media personality, but they all make their points at various times. And Candace Owens definitely does bring a different perspective from the right or the more conservative side. And most black people in this country are Democrats, so they come from the left perspective. And that's amazing to me too, that most of us are Democrats when really most black family values tend to be more conservative or in the middle. But the point here is the hypocrisy. Again, if you say you want black people or black representation, why then is it only a certain kind of black representation? And that's what you see being pushed a lot of times in our government. That's what you see being pushed with this cancel culture. You see it all the time. Those who push cancel culture the hardest are the liberal left, which tries to make minorities believe, well, we're your friend, but do something wrong or do something they don't like, and the same racial epithets you hear from ultra conservatives and rednecks on the right comes out of their mouth too. The same type of benefits, that we see others taking advantage of to our detriment, they do too when it comes to gentrification and other things of that sort. They do it too. And think about this. The group that's the most vocal in this country about civil rights, equal rights, and women's rights is white women by far. But what oftentimes also goes overlooked is that white women are also the greatest beneficiaries of civil rights, way more than black women, way more than Asian women, way more than Hispanics, more than any minority group. White women somehow work their way to the front of the line and are the greatest beneficiaries. And yet at the same time, they have made themselves also the greatest advocates. But what are they advocating, or who are they advocating for? Because it's almost as if, again, things that should primarily or first and foremost concern minority groups who are in need of these resources and opportunities the most, they take it over and they get it first. And that goes overlooked and dismissed. And that's why I'm not with a lot of times when I see these women's marches and things being organized, where I tell other people, other women, especially black women, things, you need to check that out before you participate. Because your participation doesn't guarantee you anything. Sometimes they're just using you as numbers to leverage against someone else to get what they want, but not what you want. Their plans don't always include you. And somebody thinking, well, brother, you coming off as being kind of racist. No, I'm coming off as being truthful, because this country is still very much obsessed with race and divided by race. So it's a reality that we can't ignore. We can't look past it. And so sometimes these hard conversations have to be had, and these things have to be brought out to make people look at themselves and ask yourself, are you really, as colorblind as you claim to be? And I'm not going to sit here and give all these caveats. Well, not all white people, not all white men, not all white women, not all black men, not all black women. You should already know that. All right? Especially if you know you're not like that. It shouldn't impact you, but it should make you think. Because you're around other people who probably do share these particular points of view, which is why our society is the way that it is. All right? I don't hold it against people because of the ethnicity or culture they were born into. You couldn't do nothing about that. That's why I think racism is stupid. But the fact that we have to give so much attention and time to it, it just says how stupid we are as a society, that we can't get over something like that, even to the point where people twist the Bible today to make it all racial, when that's not how the people in the Bible thought. That's not how the God who gave the Bible thought. Or even thinks now. That's how we think, because we've been poisoned by this stuff. But let's listen to more of what the brother got to say.
It's a black woman, right? So why won't you invite somebody like her? And Joe Biden keeps talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson. Well, we have the first black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you know who came along long before Ketanji Brown Jackson? It was another black woman. Her name was Janice Brown Rogers. She was first appointed by George Bush, to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. Janice Brown Rogers, she grew up in a deep segregated South. Guess who rejected her nomination? Joseph Robinette Biden. Isn't that interesting? Do they want more diversity? Do they want more black people? Do they want more black women? In fact, Janice Brown Rogers was nominated twice to the U.S. Supreme Court, and she was twice filibustered by Joseph Robinette Biden. You guys know why she was twice filibustered? Because Janice Brown Rogers is a conservative. She's also a Republican, and she was raised in the rural, deep, segregated South by a single mother, and she knows the extreme hardships of growing up in a single-parent household, and she spoke up publicly against Lyndon B. Johnson.
Now, you hear that, right? Like I said, when they say they want black representation, It's not all the same. You got to be affiliated with the right group. You got to know the right people. You got to be the right kind of black. Because if it was truly they were looking for black representation, people of an excellent mind, then a lot of these political affiliations wouldn't matter. The only thing that would matter is that the person is qualified and can get the job done, and they can address some of the social ills that we're dealing with and facing. But they want you to be politically aligned with their agenda. Why? Because they have no intention of letting you ever try to bring anything from your own agenda or concerns to the forefront when they have something else that's the priority over it.
Against the millions of Black Americans being raised by single mothers, against the Black mothers collecting pensions from the government. She's against diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she's against affirmative action. She's saying that these programs are actually destroying the Black community. And her main goal was to bring the Black father back into Black families in America. But she was filibustered twice by Joe Biden. You see, they talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's all 100% bullshit, okay? You can have a bunch of people that's coming from a multicultural background that have different religions, but these people, they can all think the same. They can all act the same, okay? They actually want conformity. They don't want a diversity of opinion. Because that's what the Western society is, really. Because to you, conformity is actually freedom. To you, oligarchy is actually a democracy. You tell people you built the best system in the world. Okay, explain to me this, okay? If your system is so great, how come that 24 million children in America are currently being raised by single mothers? How's that the best society in the world? How's that the best system in the world? You claim to have the best society in the world. However, over half of your marriages end up in divorce. Is a marriage supposed to be a contract that's binding for life, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer? What the hell happened to your marriage vows? You tell a woman that it is okay to rack up a body count of 175 during your years in college. And after you graduate, you can become a born-again virgin. And this will have no consequences for the rest of your life. This will not harm your relationship or your marriage. Yeah, that's the free and democratic West for you.
Now, he brought up an interesting point, too, about divorce. No country, don't quote me on this, but you can look it up. I don't believe any country on earth has more divorces than the United States. When it comes to marriage, we are the poster child for failed marriages here in the U.S. And that's whether you're religious or not, because Bible believers get divorced just as much as secular people do. And think about it. We, through divorce, have made being a divorce attorney as an actual occupation or aspect of the law, where attorneys have become multimillionaires just on divorce, not on helping families stay together at family court or any of these other things, but on making sure families stay apart, then making sure one party gets the most out of the divorce, on making sure the assets are divided up into a way that's more favorable for their client. And these attorneys become celebrities. They become big time. They become famous. Their reputation precedes them. People pass them on to their boyfriends or homeboys or girlfriends or whatever. Oh, you getting a divorce? Child, call my attorney. He helped me. All these types of things. This is the kind of reputation that a lot of people have built for themselves now. It's not based on cohesion and keeping families together. It's based on the destruction of the family and keeping people apart. People even taking that same posture in family court by keeping children away from their parents. Let's listen.
I don't want to make this video too long. This video is meant to be a preview for my series that's coming up in August, okay? I'm going to go on the election special 2024 mode. My goal is to destroy the narrative of the mainstream media. Everything you have been told is a lie. Everything about China, everything about Russia, about Ukraine, about the Middle East, okay? Look up what's happening to the Palestinian Christians, okay? So for the next 2-3 weeks, I mentioned before, I will release a mini-series on the 30 divorces in my family. The next video will be extremely long. It will be my most difficult and emotional upload. I thought long and hard about making my next video, but I think it's extremely important to get this message out. I'm going to tell you guys the severe consequences of this divorce and fatherless epidemic and the severe consequences it has on the next generation. And after that, I will kick off my election special with a full-length documentary on the consequences of secularism. So,
all right. So that is the Chinese historian. All right. Y'all can post your thoughts in the comments about what he had to say and in the chat. And we might be able to, address some of those. Yeah, Kendrick makes a good point here. That's, media is about narratives far more than truth. Exactly. Promoting the propaganda to try to sway people to believe what you want them to believe rather than what's actually true. That's exactly it. The narratives, and people are shaping their lives and making decisions around false narratives rather than based on truth. And you see it again in the political world, in the social world, but you see it in the religious world also. All these false doctrines and things that are being promoted and pushed. Now, there were some things that he brought up in his commentary that I want to play this next commentary about. Blacks in power don't empower blacks. And this is about black academics who, and forgive me for that, y'all. My phone was supposed to be, the ringer was supposed to be off. But y'all heard my Black Dynamite ringtone probably. Right. And this is interesting because this goes back to a point also that I brought up before about why is it that we have more black politicians than we've ever had, and yet black people are still in the same position they were economically, politically, and socially 50 years ago. We have not moved since the 60s. Something's wrong with that. So let's check this out.
Since 1965, the number of black elected officials has exploded. Between 1970 and 2012, it grew from fewer than 1,500 to more than 10,000. And oh yes, a black man was elected president twice. Conventional wisdom would suggest that all these political gains would lead to economic gains.
Let me stop too real quick. All right. And I'll try not to pause it as much because I know y'all want to hear what he has to say. But I want to stop it right now just to address this. Based on the way this brother sounds, and even perhaps the way he looks, a lot of black folks that look at this and hear him and immediately cut him off and don't want to hear anything he has to say. And that's a problem amongst us in our community, is the way we judge each other. We're more harsh against one another than against anyone else. And the way this brother looks and the way he sounds has nothing to do with the truth about the things that he's saying. But it's too many cosmetic things that we can't get by. And that's why the Bible tells us through the prophet Hosea that my people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. Do you think all those prophets in the Bible sounded robust and forceful and powerful? Like your favorite actor or actress or a rapper or speaker? They might have sounded like this guy. The apostles may have sounded, some of them may have sounded like this guy. You don't know what they sounded like. But the Bible doesn't make that an issue. It's the message. And I hope that we don't get caught up in the cosmetics and miss the message. Let's listen.
But that is not proven to be the case. In fact, during an era of growing black political influence, blacks as a group progressed at a slower rate than whites, and the black poor actually lost ground. Why was the conventional wisdom wrong? Because it was based on the incorrect assumption that politics was the pathway to black progress. Only black politicians, so the thinking went, could properly understand and address the challenges facing black Americans. It wasn't stable families, hard work, or education that would lift blacks into the middle class. It was more black city councilmen, Congress, and senators. But the evidence, even according to liberal social scientists like Gary Orfield, indicates that there may be little relationship between the success of black leaders and the opportunities of typical black families. So while black politicians from Tom Bradley and Marion Barry to Maxine Waters and John Conyers achieved considerable personal success, their constituents did not. Yet this calculus, political success as a prerequisite to a better life, remains progressive orthodoxy today. When Michael Brown was shot dead after assaulting a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, much was made over the racial composition of the police department and city leaders. But if Black representation among law enforcement and city officials is so critically important, how do you explain the rioting in Baltimore the following year after a Black suspect there died in police custody? At the time, 40% of Baltimore's police officers were Black. The Baltimore Police Commissioner was also Black, along with the mayor and a majority of the city council. What can be said of Baltimore is also true of Cleveland, Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Washington, D.C., where Black mayors and police chiefs, city councilmen, and school superintendents have been in office for decades. But to what end? As I document in my book, False Black Power, when Blacks had little political power, they nevertheless made significant economic progress. In the 1940s and 50s, Black labor participation rates exceeded those of whites. Black incomes grew much faster than white incomes, and the Black poverty rate fell by 40 percentage points. Between 1940 and 1970, that is, during the Jim Crow era, with its racist laws, and before any affirmative action, the number of Blacks in middle-class professions quadrupled. In other words, racial gaps were steadily narrowing without any special treatment for Blacks. And then came the war on poverty in the mid-60s. This was supposed to close the gap once and for all. Yet despite billions of dollars of government assistance in the form of welfare payments, housing projects, and enforced hiring programs like affirmative action, Black poverty rates remained unchanged relative to white poverty rates.
Now let's stop right there for a moment. Let me backtrack it just a bit. There were some things that he said earlier that you may have caught. He said the key to Black success or advancement was not more Blacks in government. Now, that's not to mean in any way that we don't need Black people in government. We do. You should have people in government that represent you and that have a connection to you in that way, because, again, this country has so much of what it does politically based on race. So that is a necessity here in the West. But the things that were the biggest factors on Black success at any level was, number one, the stability of the Black family. A child who has a stable home environment that they can come to will be, or has a greater chance rather, of being successful. And that's not just a Black family, it's any family. Because there are a lot of whites that come out of poverty also. All right. And they actually in greater number, but it's just per capita, the Blacks. There are a lot of whites I know that have came out of single parent families and households and things of this sort. And I can tell you, whether it was white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, or otherwise, people who tend to came out of stable home environments, family environments, tend to excel and do better than those who didn't. Because it seemed like those who were missing something at home always were playing catch up. And it doesn't mean that a lot of people didn't go on and do well and people still, don't go on and do well. It just means that the way that they go oftentimes is harder. As far as building a stable community, you got to start with the family. The first institution that God Almighty built was a family. When he put that man in the garden, his job wasn't complete until he pulled a woman out of that man and brought them together as husband and wife. And then the world began to be populated by families. The scripture says, I'm going to take you two of a family. It's always talking about families. The model is always there in some shape or fashion, even in types and shadows. Even the Lord sent out the apostles 2 by 2. He didn't send people out on a solo mission. Why? Because there's something about being joined with another. The the confidence it instills or boosts in you that you know you got somebody who has your back. You know, having a family gives you a safe haven and things of this sort that you can fall back on. The family is the backbone, not only of the ecclesia, but of the community and of every nation. Without it, you don't have anything but chaos. And these very programs that were introduced, welfare, one of the most damaging aspects of the welfare promotion here in this country was you could only have one parent in the home. And who they kick out the house? They kicked out the fathers. They kicked out the dads. So the welfare assistance from the government, which was part of the war on poverty, became a war on family. Let's look at this again.
Housing projects and enforced hiring programs like affirmative action.
Now, housing projects. If you grew up in the projects, like some of us have, or you visited your relatives in the projects, most of the time you are visiting a single family household. Well, hardly anybody ever talks about their uncle, but they always talk about their auntie, their grandma, or their mama or somebody. And why is that? Because the welfare and the housing projects are related. Because you got on welfare so you can qualify for the housing. So again, you remove that fatherly influence that's necessary to have a strong community. And you leave the mother there by herself, which is not supposed to be. And what does that do? It put excessive pressure on women now to carry a bigger load than they were ever meant to carry. And then the children get less attention. And what happens when children get less attention? They're more easily distracted because something's going to fill in that gap. And what rises in a lot of these communities with housing projects? Gangs, the streets, pimping, prostitution, drugs, every illicit thing you can think of to get into. And then people constantly, all the time, sometimes we blame the parents too much. One parent is not an octopus. They don't have superpowers where they can split and divide themselves into multiple people and manage their household and kids all the time. That parent may work full time or be in some kind of program or whatever, and they can't manage as well. And then sometimes people can stay on welfare too long because we know some people hustle the system, especially through Section 8 and all the other kind of stuff, and they never do anything to better or improve themselves with the opportunity that they have. And so the housing projects can, in some regards, become like a prison without walls because people become complacent. It creates this mindset of entitlement that the government going to always provide and do for us because we deserve it, but never that we're going to do for ourselves and build ourselves up because we got some kind of pride about ourselves. And then now affirmative action is a little more of an involved conversation. I think it's both good and bad. I think it's necessary in some cases, and in other cases, I see where it's been a detriment. But we'll talk about that later. Let's keep listening.
Black poverty rates remained unchanged relative to white poverty rates. In fact, a strong case can be made that to the extent that a social program, however well-meaning, interferes with the group's self-development, it does more harm than good. Government policies that discourage marriage and undermine the work ethic, open-ended welfare benefits, for example.
Now, what he just pointed out, the very things that the government sometimes sponsors are anti-Christ. God created the family, and we have allowed the government to break up the family. Or we bought or into the government's line and drunk their Kool-Aid. And we've broken up our families for some assistance or to make us believe, well, I don't need a man, or I don't need them, or I don't need a family, or I don't need a wife, whatever the case may be. It hasn't, the government's focus, especially for minorities, especially Black people, because of our sordid history with this country. You haven't been at the top of the list in terms of the priorities of keeping your families and communities together so that you can be stable. That just hasn't happened. And so you can't constantly live either blaming the government. Once you see what the government is about, what they really do, you got to take some accountability and responsibility for yourself. And we've done that, and we can still do that. But let's listen.
Help keep poor people poor. No wonder then that more Black politicians bringing home more government aid has done so little to improve rates of Black employment, home ownership, and academic achievement. As economist Thomas Sowell explains, the relationship between political success and economic success has been more nearly inverse than direct. The history of Germans, Jews, and Italians in America supports Sowell's observation. Each of these groups made significant economic gains before ever attaining significant political power. Asians are the most recent example. How many prominent Asian politicians can you name? On the other hand, the Irish, whose rise from poverty in the 19th century was especially slow, were very politically successful. Irish-run political organizations in places like Boston and Philadelphia dominated local government. In the US, the Irish had more political success than any other ethnic minority group. Yet the Irish were, according to Sowell, the slowest rising of all European immigrants to America. The Black experience in America is of course different from the experience of the Irish or any other ethnic group. But that doesn't undermine the obvious conclusion. Human capital is far more important than political capital. And the formula for prosperity is the same across the human spectrum. Traditional values such as marriage, stable families, education, and hard work are immeasurably more important than the color of your congressman, or senator, or police chief, or president. Jason Riley of the Manhattan Institute for Prager University.
All right, so that was Jason Riley. He also wrote a book called Fake Black Power, which if you can get that, you might want to check that out to give you a different perspective about certain things. You know, and I like to read, books that come from different perspectives because it keeps your mind expanded in thinking. All right. So anybody got any comments, questions, or anything they want to bring up right now? I don't see anybody saying anything. And if not, we're going to move on to the next video. But if so, go ahead and make a point and we see if we can discuss it here briefly. But the next two videos I have, this one right here, for those of us, especially for those of you who are parents or you got nephews or nieces or you're a godparent, this right here going to get you fired up. Because this is going to show you again, when the family fails and it's no longer the first institution or the priority in any society, the morals and values of that society also fail. And the floodgates open to allow things into that society that will destroy it systematically over time. And this story right here is about a biology professor who was fired for actually teaching biology because he didn't adhere to the pronouns and all the other things. Let's check this out.
He's a professor who taught a lesson about basic, unremarkable anatomy and physiology, and his college fired him. Hi, it's Stuart Shepard, and this is First Liberty Live. Thank you for being part of this project, and thank you for sharing it with your friends and family. You're going to find this topic today, I think, particularly interesting. I've got two people to introduce to you. Keisha Russell is one of our attorneys here at First Liberty Institute, and Johnson Varkey taught anatomy and physiology at a college here in Texas and similar courses for 20 years. Hi, Keisha. Hi, Johnson.
Hi, Stuart.
Good to see both of you. St. Philip's College is on the east side of San Antonio. The name would suggest it might be religious, but it's not. It's just a 125-year-old community college there. You taught there for 20 of those years. What does the school mean to you? Why were you there?
Yeah, I was a research scientist, but my passion was to teach all the time because I've been involved in ministry and I was involved in teaching. So my passion was to teach at St. Philip's College, being a well-reputed school. I always wanted to get in there and teach. So 20 years ago, I got that teaching position and I've been teaching there for last 20 years.
And that's part of what you do there. You also are an associate pastor at the church that you're with there in San Antonio.
Yes, I am an associate pastor at the International Bible Church. We're in San Antonio.
And to be clear, you keep those two roles separate, right? You don't bring the preaching into the classroom.
I sure don't.
Yeah, I'm sure we can talk about anatomy and physiology in church if you want to, I guess.
Yeah, no, I don't bring my preaching into my classroom when I teach about human anatomy and physiology. I just teach basic biology. That's all I teach.
Let's talk about one particular day when you're in the middle of your lecture and you kind of notice that 4 students have gotten up and walked out of your classroom. What were you teaching that day that appeared to trigger them, to cause them to exit the room?
That day was teaching the chapter on human reproductive system. So when I teach human reproductive system, I emphasize on the fact that male and female, or the maleness or the femaleness, are controlled by 2 genes. See, in all our cells, we have 23 pairs of genes and chromosomes. So the 23rd pair is that determines the sex of a person. So if that 23rd pair of chromosomes are X and X, it is a female, and if it's X and Y, it's a male. And I mentioned in the class that that's what makes male and female, not our thinking. Then second thing I would mention is, to perpetuate human species, to continue our species, not just human species, any species, the sex has to be between male and female, not between 2 men or 2 women. To continue the species, that's how the body is designed. So the sex has to be between male and female.
Now, pause for a moment. What he said would be perfectly acceptable at any other time in human history, except for in the United States and perhaps in Europe within the last 5 years or so. That in order for a species to continue, there must be sex between the male and the female. All right. So in our case, the way our biology works, we need a male and a female to reproduce. We're not amoebas, or organisms that, separate and split and, from itself and produce more of itself. No, the way the Lord designed us was to come together, to copulate, to create life. Any homosexual type of lifestyle, I don't care how many letters in the alphabet you use to name it or promote it, is anti-life in and of itself, because it cannot promote this particular aspect of our existence. So it can't be, I guess, in essence, pro-life. It would have to be anti-life, because it can't create. It can't. And artificial insemination is not the way to do that. You still need parts from both a male and female. People who choose that because they don't want to be with the opposite sex are just basically acquiescing to the truth that you can't create life. You can't procreate without a male and female. And so any other type of lifestyle is really genocide in essence. And I know what I'm saying might get this video canceled, who knows? But I'm giving my opinion, and I think I should be entitled, just as entitled to that as others who advocate otherwise. But looking at this from the perspective of logic, simple science, that's what it is that's being promoted when you talk about these particular lifestyles that stray away from normal, healthy, heterosexual relationships. And exactly, Sabbath Elohim. And I was going to say that without saying that, but you said it for me. So we just might as well say it. It's not just anti-life, it's also anti-God. That's right. It's anti-Christ. First commandment the Most High gave to humanity was to be fruitful and multiply. And I've heard some preacher try to, get amens by saying, I know y'all be talking about he didn't make Adam and Steve, but he made Steve too. He didn't make Steve in the garden with Adam. He made Eve. See, I don't like when ministers try to cater, to folks just to get their approval. No, we got to tell the truth. And whatever the consequences are, that's just what they're going to be. He made one man for one woman and one woman for one man and told them to be fruitful and multiply. And that pattern is supposed to be consistent and continue. But in our society today, the corruption of morality and our values, which stems from the breaking apart of our families, have opened the floodgates that have allowed these kinds of things to come in. And people are afraid to call it what it is. They're afraid to call it perversion. They're afraid to say that the Bible calls these things abomination. But it does. And people have gone so far as to even try to create new translations of the scriptures and try to omit these names that call sin and perversion exactly what it is. And then we're forced oftentimes in our regular lives now to try to find some way to live with these things and compromise with these things to try to force acceptance on us quite subtly. Now, look, you can love the person or love the sinner and not the sin, and you don't have to be disrespectful to people. The Lord will judge them just like he's going to judge us all. But at the same time, allowing them to have their right to exist should not compromise or infringe upon yours. You should not be forced to have to accept their morality or their standards. And that's what we're seeing being imposed more and more and more and more in this country today. So let's listen to what the rest is happened.
And the third thing that I would mention is, see, when the sperm, which has 23 chromosomes, and the egg, which has 23 chromosomes, when they join together, we have 46 chromosomes. That's at the 23 pairs, right? 46 chromosomes. So that cell, which is the first cell, when the sperm and egg joins, that's the zygote, which has 46 chromosomes. That cell begins to divide. And if we allow that to divide and continue, in 38 weeks, we have a beautiful baby. And in that whole process, after the formation of the zygote, we are not adding any information into that, and we are not deleting any information from that cell.
It's a complete person.
That's a complete. So that's why I mentioned to them that zygote is the beginning of life, not at birth. When I mentioned all those four students, they just walked out.
Did you quote scripture?
No.
Did you get behind a pulpit and preach for a little bit?
No.
And I've known you only for a short time, but I think I read you pretty well. You wouldn't do that.
No.
It's not what you do in the classroom, right?
I do that.
And I also know that those of us who were, and I mostly paid attention in high school, but everything you just said, I learned when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Stated pretty much just the way you just did, and also then repeated it when I got to college. There's nothing new here. There's nothing remarkable here. And frankly, I've been around the issues long enough. The gender studies people really, I don't think, would argue with you either, because they say their field of study is separate from what you just talked about, right?
Yeah, the gender study, I would say, this state the fact that X and X, those two chromosomes make a person female and XY male. That's all I mentioned in the classroom. And that's just mere biological fact.
So what is First Liberty doing, Keisha? How are we stepping in? Oh, I need to mention the fact the school that fired you. And Keisha, I'll get to you in just a second. I want to read a little excerpt from the letter that they sent you. And we just heard what the lesson was about, but they wrote you a letter, and they said there were several reports of, and this is in quotes now, religious preaching discriminatory comments about homosexuals and transgender individuals, anti-abortion rhetoric, and misogynistic banter. Did that happen in your classroom?
No.
Did the letter include any examples?
No. The thing is, what they said is that my teaching was offensive and unacceptable. That's the only two words that they used. And they never said, or he never said, what is my religious preaching, which I never did, and what is the comment that I made against A people. You know, I never did any of those things in my classroom.
And it's worth mentioning, you've been there 20 years. This is, and you've taught these lessons over and over and over again. And this is the first time that this reaction has occurred. Keisha, you're looking at this as an attorney. What do you see?
Now, before we get to Keisha, I want y'all to think about this. Four students walked out. Remember what I told you? That group is a minority. It wasn't all the students that walked out. It was 4 students that walked out of the class, and through them, no doubt, they were able to get this man fired or removed and make up all these charges about him. Now, why were they offended? Why were they offended? It's because their lifestyle wasn't promoted. And when you teach the truth, anybody that's living a lie is always going to feel threatened by it. And because this man was able to stand on his square and teach the truth about just simple biology, the very essence that God gave humanity to create, to procreate, to create life, the very thing that caused those 4 protesters to be here, they got offended because why? The lifestyles that they condone or indulge in can't do that. And so their hypersensitivity caused them to lash out against this man. And probably perhaps because this man stands for something greater than them, like for the Most High. He's a preacher of the gospel. So think about that. You know, the scripture in Psalm says, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot a vain thing? And what we're seeing right now from a lot of these communities is people are raging and plotting against righteousness and against anybody who stands for righteousness. And they plotting vain things, trying to pass all these bogus laws and trying to restrict other people's rights and privileges behind their feelings and behind what they want, rather than what the Most High wants.
Huge problems for the college. You know, when I look at that, I see a couple of issues. One is that it's pretty clear that he's teaching science and biology according to his long experience and his very impressive academic record. And the other thing is, it's very clear he wasn't doing any religious preaching. But even if he were, those things, meaning if someone interpreted the idea that life begins at conception to be a religious statement, he's still allowed to make that statement during his class because he's still backing it up with biological facts. And it's in his position, it's fact. So according to academic freedom, according to the First Amendment, he would still be allowed to say those things, even if it were considered to be a religious statement. But in his view, it isn't a religious statement.
It's not anti-abortion to say life begins at conception.
No.
That's not taking a political position against a procedure.
No, he's just saying what the curriculum, what his experience, what his education says is true. And that is something that he must do. And even further, the college didn't follow its own process, because even if they did receive comments and complaints, according to their process, he's supposed to receive those comments and those complaints and have an opportunity to respond. And neither was he able to see the complaints, nor was he able to respond to anything. He was just immediately fired. And so there are a lot of issues here, and a lot of bad things the college did to this professor.
And she hit on a key point. You never got to face your accusers. You don't know who they are. And you didn't get to go through the process that the school has put in place, right? And Keisha, that puts the school, frankly, in a bad position because they didn't even follow their own rules on this.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, besides the fact that this is unlawful under federal employment law, right? If they're considering his statements to be religious, they can't fire him for that reason anyway. You can't fire someone for being a religious person, for even saying, these things. And so there's just a lot of issues here. And, we wrote the college a letter and let them know we want you to reinstate him. Otherwise, there will be further issues for you down the road.
Help us understand what makes this a First Liberty case. How does religious freedom enter into this?
Well, the college made it a religious liberty case because they said we're firing you because of your religious speech, because of your religious beliefs. And although he did not preach in the classroom, although he did not make religious statements in the classroom, even if anyone interpreted those things to be religious, the college still can't fire him for that anyways. They're supposed to engage in discourse in a classroom. We have this free exchange of ideas and this idea of academic freedom, which is very, very powerful in the university setting. And so for all those reasons, the university is wrong in its position. And it was wrong in firing Dr. Varkey. And it was even more wrong for not even allowing Dr. Varkey to respond before they fired him after 20 years of service.
And one important part of this also, on top of all that, is I assume you had a syllabus for your class, right, that you hand out, and that's approved by the college, correct?
Yes.
So they put their stamp of approval and said, yes, go teach this.
Yes.
It seems wrong that they come back and say, but not like that.
Yeah, the syllabus, textbook, all the notes, everything is provided by the department. So we just follow the syllabus, we follow the textbook, follow the notes that the department gives. So that's all I did.
What would you like to see happen?
As Krishna said, they want my position back. They need to reinstate me back, and help me to do what I love to do, which is to teach.
Now think about that, you guys. What would you do if this was you? What would you do in a case where perhaps maybe your son or daughter, niece or nephew, or someone near, dear to you or close to you went to a school where this type of situation came up? And this is not the only case that has made the news like this, where a professor or a teacher at the high school level has even just dared to just teach biology, the same biology that we all learned in school. But this is a different world that we're living in now. And things have changed so dramatically and so fast that a lot of times people are not paying attention and we can't keep up. And things are happening right underneath our nose that we're missing. Shout out to my brother, Orthodox Moore, because a few years back, he was one of the few people, in fact, at the time, he was the only one I could think of that was willing to even address situations that we're now currently facing. He was trying to get out ahead of it and make people aware of it. And instead, people turned on him and started accusing him of being the very thing that he was addressing and trying to go on a shame campaign. But none of those people ever addressed the things that he was talking about. And now we see the results of a lot of times our inaction or ignoring things. It brings us to this point. And Sabbath Elohim said, homeschool, and online college for the win. That's one route to go. And I mean, it seems like we're being pushed that way. But, in a society where the majority of people still claim to have some type of religious faith in the God of the Bible, or even in another religion that agrees at least with the Bible in terms of certain moral standards, you shouldn't have to resort to that. Why is it that a small group of people get to dominate the majority of public thought or our consciousness? Whenever you look on TV and you see protests going on in the capitals, it's normally certain groups of people, certain types of groups of people that you can pick out and realize this is who's a lot of times doing it. Who are a lot of the politicians catering to? Just look at it. If you want to get something, you normally got to give something, which means that you got to allow something from that particular end to come in order to get what you want. There's always this compromise that seems to put people on a losing end. And so I'm not necessarily with just forfeiting everything and giving it over to people, because some people don't have the option to homeschool or go to college online. So we still got to fight even for those who don't have that opportunity or that option, and so this, so this is an issue here. All right, so this next video that I'm gonna play here, and then we're gonna conclude with the life of Sarah Baartman, which I think a lot of you will really enjoy. But this video right here, this bothered me. This really bothered me. And I'm not sure just how much of this I want to even play, but let's just go for it. This is from a channel called Black Culture Unlocked.
This 9-year-old boy is rapping about murdering people, drugs, and sexual assault, even though he is clearly being influenced, controlled, and manipulated for money. It breaks my heart every time I see a kid who grew up too fast because of their environment. Lil RT has been stripped of his childhood and his innocence.
First, she real life, so he a fast. Exactly. But now I got him on my wings, so I'm gonna have him right there. You feel me? So like, I can't stop that he used to. Because at the end of the day, I try to tell little bro, I try to help little bro as much as I can, but I'm not his fault. He go back to his mama, and his mama is at the end of the day, so whatever he really continue, so I can't stop.
And he's not at home playing video games. He's out there rapping about street life and violence, while the adults around him allow it to happen. In their minds, this is just pure entertainment. But there is a reason why violent movies are R-rated and why children shouldn't be exposed to that kind of stuff. There is a reason an adult is there to guide the child, educate them, and set them on the right track. Today, I want to talk to you about this little man. If you guys have ever heard of him before, this is a young boy who went viral a while ago after dropping his freestyle. Social media went crazy. That's because his lyrics portrayed a hyper-aggressive and dominance-driven mentality. He raps about guns, violence, and sex. Where do you think he learned to act and speak like this? Where are his parents, you might ask? Well, there's a lot of mystery surrounding his personal life and even his real name. And so far, his guardians are doing a pretty good job at keeping this boy's personal information private. He became a viral sensation when he released the song 60 Minutes. If Lil RT was not a kid, this song would have been considered excellent by today's standards. And we can see why. The beat, the rhyming, and the vibe seem like a normal rap video. It's about hood culture and everything that comes with it. But because he is so young and the rapping is so dark, his video has raised a lot of controversy. Lil RT is getting too much exposure for his negative behavior. Right now, he has over 222,000 followers on Instagram. There has been a lot of negative feedback on Twitter and Instagram, saying that it is not normal for a child to talk and act this way. He is not supposed to be encouraged to do this sort of thing. When he can't even spell half the words he's rapping about. Many people are blaming his parents, guardians, and the adults around him. But I believe that not everyone understands what it truly means to be an adult. It has nothing to do with being over 18. To be an adult means to be a fully mature person, someone who can provide a safe and stable environment for a child to grow in. It is our responsibility to teach these children right from wrong. Show them what honesty means. We need to love and respect, not just our people who are children copy our behavior. They do exactly what we do, say what we say, and act the way we act. As adults, we are their role models. We create this environment where we get to shape their thoughts, perceptions, and way of life. And not many understand the responsibility that comes with being a parent. For some kids, life in the hood is all they know. They don't have a leg to stand on. They don't get the chance to be a child and enjoy the outside world. Nobody teaches them that it's okay to be a kid, and I get that. These children are being pushed to act older than they are, and they are glorified when they act like baby gangsters.
Now, think about this. There's very little here, as I looked at this video, in terms of programming children and indoctrinating them versus educating them, that I saw that was different from what happens to child soldiers in Africa. Because when you take a young, impressionable mind and you begin to indoctrinate them and introduce them to things, you have control over that individual, you dominate that individual, you can pretty much influence or lead, mislead, and teach them just about whatever you want to. And that will shape their thinking oftentimes for life if you're not careful. It's a programming. And this is a tactic of the devil himself. Satan always goes after what's most precious when it's in its most vulnerable state. That's why children are the target of pedophiles and others who are leading the charge for these debauched, groups that are always advocating to lower the age of consent and that are always pushing to teach their lifestyles to children in kindergarten and preschool and first grade and grade school to try to indoctrinate them so that they can have control of their thinking and their minds. Same thing happens when you go to another country where they have child soldiers. They get them young, introduce them to violence and drugs early, introduce them to sex early to make them feel like an adult, and they make them accountable to the leader. It becomes like a cult. And if you look, my sister Tracy she's posted something, says a very strong push for that in Missouri. Yeah, they always, somewhere, some perverted person or group is constantly trying to lower the age of consent. Why? So they can have access to your children. They're trying to take more authority away from the parents and empower the kids to be able to make decisions that they're not mature enough to make. So they want to take the authority and protection. They want to take the authority from the parent and the protection of the child also away by depowering the parent. And this child could be consenting to something that they have no clue. And legally, you won't be able to do anything. So when parents start killing pedophiles, what is the court system or the justice system going to do then? If we get to that point. And in the same way, as I said, the influence of the culture, it starts going after kids early. Look at all these crazy videos you see on Instagram and TikTok where grown women are twerking on children, yet drag queens reading stories to children in elementary school. And you have people who are supposed to be protecting the children encouraging this. And I submit to you this: there's no group of children more vulnerable than Black children. They have the least amount of protection. They're exposed to the most. And oftentimes the excuse is, well, our culture, this, that, and that. We love to talk about how rich Black culture is, but we hate to talk about the toxic aspect of certain parts of Black culture and the poison that comes out of it also. These children are having sex earlier. STDs are spreading faster among teenagers. Go look up the statistics for the city of Houston, just Houston, Texas. I think had like 42,000 new cases of syphilis in a month. And yet all these different things going on. We've glamorized strippers in trying to talk about, well, women are taking agency over their sexuality. So that now becomes the impetus or the excuse now to promote the hypersexualization of Black women. And that's what we're going to do this video about Sarah Baartman last, to show you what it did to her. But now we're doing it to ourselves. Who you going to blame for this? You can't blame nobody else. You can't claim to be kings and queens and children of the Most High and woke and all this other stuff when you act just as sleepy as ever. Once you're aware of the plots and plans of the society you're in or the enemy himself who's pulling the puppet strings, then you plot a different course. You make better plans so that you don't become a victim of it. You don't keep making excuses because you keep falling into it. But let's look at this. See, the environment that you put a child in has a lot to do with what they become.
Meanwhile, the children who grow up in the hood don't consider their behavior as wrong because it is normal to them. Just listen to RT's freestyle and you will know what I mean. Now listen to this. If what RT is writing about is harsh, they might be pointing out exactly what he sees. This is normal to him. So, if we want to talk about him and his rapping style, we also need to talk about his neighborhood, his surroundings, and his way of life, because there are millions of kids just like him. And these kids just don't have anyone to film them and post on social media. Lil RT was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. As you may already know, this area has a bad reputation for street violence and gang-related activities.
Atlanta police say there are about 50,000 documented gang members across the state.
RT is just a kid, and in his lyrics, he raps about sex. Remember, this is a world you can't read, but is edged by adults to act like an adult. He raps about treating all women like they have no value, or self-worth, or deserve any respect. He then goes on to glorify street life and violence. But even if kids grow up in the hood.
Now, did y'all catch that? Look at what's blanked out. This is a little boy saying this. And adults are approving this. Why? Because they're making money from it. It's almost like this boy is being pimped and corrupted at the same time.
He then goes on to glorify street life and violence. But even if kids grow up in the hood, we can see cases where a mother, father, or guardian doesn't allow them to talk like RT. They have to act with respect. But not everyone is raised like that. Not everyone has been lucky to live and grow in a stable household. Lil RT is just the product of his environment. The environment is toxic. It's just not right. Kids are not supposed to be speaking like that, let alone be making money from the rap industry. No one wants their little brother, sister, or child to talk like Lil RT. But if that's all you hear, all that cussing and toxicity, then that's all you're going to repeat. In the way he is influenced, we can see the corrosion of Black culture. This is the kind of content that people shouldn't find to be funny, yet it's everywhere. And when Candace Owens, a famous commentator and host, covered his story, here's how RT responded to her comments.
What? What happened?
You know what's the worst thing about this? The adults around Lil RT are not condemning this or trying to stop him. They are rooting for him and allowing it to happen. They are out here creating this platform for him, building a social media presence so they can use him financially.
We got donation.
Rich donated $1. I'm sorry to repeat you.
We've come to a point where we see a lot more parents today who care about views, likes, and comments more than they care for the children. These people are so focused on their TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook accounts that they go so far as to use their children to get attention. They are desperate for it and will do anything to get it. They have no dignity, morals, and values. The child is blameless in these situations because the parents and guardians have complete control over what they post about the children online. And it is things like these that get the views, get the clicks, and make them go viral. This is a sick culture and a type of problem where we can see adults encouraging their children to recite some rhymes, put on the right clothes, or act a certain way, and it will go viral. This child is being made into this rap star, a wannabe gangster kid. This can have detrimental impact on his quality of life and mental health. It can lead him down the wrong path.
Y'all see this? This is just sad.
Obviously, RT is an intelligent and creative person, but if his innocence, curiosity, and childhood are taken away from him, then he will have a hard time building himself as an individual, someone who can thrive in society, improve his education, and work on his career when he gets older.
This is the kind of image, young man holding a gun, that little RT is being influenced by what he's being around. He's already rapping about murdering and killing people. So how does that help build the community? It doesn't. It only contributes more to the cycle of black on black crime and self-genocide that we already perpetuate among us now. It doesn't raise the bar or standard for what we should be or what we should achieve. It only brings it further down and influences more people. And then other people see this and they want to imitate this. So now little RT becomes almost like the model or poster child for other people to do this to their children. And it starts to make me ask the question, do we really love our children? Do we really love ourselves? I mean, this is way beyond a parent putting their electric bill or TV bill in their child's name, which that's wrong and trifling. But this right here, turning your child into something that really has no positives, no upside to it, but a downside. But because the money is coming in, you know, the parents look at it as a win-win. They think they're giving him a career, but he's not going to be a well-adjusted adult if he keeps on this path. And a lot of people will defend this, say that we're being sanctimonious, we're being self-righteous, but they don't look at the long-term effects. And then the same people will be on the internet passing around memes and everything and talking about all Black people need to stop doing this to each other, but they won't stop this from happening so that Black people will stop doing these things to each other. Folks more upset about Bronny, LeBron James Jr. being drafted to the Lakers than they are about their communities being destroyed. And they're trying to compare a sports thing with something that's actually going on right underneath them. Keep the sports. That's supposed to be fun. That ain't political. That ain't social. But this is a lot more serious. Because this is about a battle for the soul of the people, for the minds of the masses. Bronny James gonna be okay. His daddy a billionaire. He don't care if you root for him or if you don't. Whether he makes it in the NBA or not. He's already rich. He already won. But everybody else is losing. And we're missing it all the time. So let's play this last video. I'm just going to let this one play. I'm going to try not to interrupt. This is about the life of Sarah Baartman. It's about 16 minutes long.
The last couple of years, the trend has reigned supreme. Women are paying thousands of dollars to get BBLs to look like the Kardashians, Cardi B, and Nicki.
All right, the sound too low on this one. Let me see if I can make the sound louder, y'all. I'm going to try my best. I might have to use a different program. So let's see if we can get the sound higher. All right. Let me do something real quick. Y'all tell me if it sounds better this way.
That was attempt to emulate this African body. That is a figure of beauty. While Sarah was carried around, displayed, treated like some kind of freak, others were trying to copy that look.
The last couple of years, the trend has reigned supreme. Women are paying thousands of dollars to get BBLs to look like the Kardashians, Cardi B, and Nicki Minaj. But in 1810, a young woman had a completely natural, curvaceous body. She had excess fat tissue around her buttocks and hips, which made her look unusually large. Sarah Baartman was an African lady who was captured and caged She was treated like a circus animal and abused in freak shows. On the stage, she was supposed to wear outfits that kept her almost naked. People paid 2 shillings just to see her, but those who paid a few extra more got the chance to touch the woman's black skin. Known as Hot Not Venus, Sarah was the subject of public scrutiny. She was trafficked and exploited for the sexual entertainment of rich women and men because of how obsessed people were with her. Her torment didn't end even after her death. This is her story. Sarah Baartman origins. In the 18th century, slavery in the New World and Europe was a firmly established political, social, and economically lucrative institution. It provided access to cheap labor that led to mass production. Sarah Saartjie Baartman was born in 1789 near the Ganges River in the Eastern Cape, which is now part of South Africa. She was a member of the Gonagwasu group of the Khoikhoi people, a group that was known for herding cattle. Sarah grew up on a farm when slavery was at its peak. Her family likely worked as servants. Her mother passed away when she was just 2 years old, and her father, who worked as a cattle driver, died when she became a teenager. Sarah later married a Khoikhoi man who played the drums. The couple had a child together, but the child passed away shortly after birth. Because colonial influence was expanding, the Khoikhoi eventually clashed with the Dutch. Slowly but surely, the people of the Gonagwasu group became a part of the massive labor system. When Sarah was just 16 years old, her partner was killed by Dutch colonists. This is when her life completely changed. Her captors sold her into slavery to a man named Pieter Willem Cesar. He brought her to Cape Town, where she worked as a servant for his brother. It was during this period that she was called Saartjie, which is the Dutch diminutive for Sarah. Little did she know that she would catch the eyes of everyone who passed her. This brings us to another part of today's video, and that's the fascination with Sarah's body. Sarah had a unique figure. It was probably caused by a condition known as steatopygia. It was a genetic trait. She had a substantial amount of extra tissue on the thighs and buttocks, making her bum and hips appear voluptuous and visually appealing. Steatopygia is a rare condition, but common for women of the Khoi tribes in Africa. Among the Khoisan, the condition starts when the baby is born. It then fully develops by the time of the first pregnancy. This type of body, however, doesn't qualify for obesity. It is just a pronounced development of the thighs and buttocks. In other words, she was a healthy young woman. So she didn't think much about it, but as she started spending more time with the Dutch, she realized that her body was in fact associated with her hypersexualization and fetishization of curvy black women. People started pointing at her and talking about her, and rumors quickly spread. Some days, Cesar would take her with him and show her at the city's hospital. He used her physique to earn some quick cash, and it worked. Every day, more and more people would come to see the famous black girl. I want to point out that at the time, it was highly desirable and fashionable for women to have big bums. Women would wear layers of clothing that would emphasize the tiny waist and the big backside. Sarah was basically the epitome of beauty, so lots of women envied her or were mortified by her because she had such a natural body shape. Her popularity grew gradually, which brings us to another part of today's video, and that is Sarah's contract. In October 1810, Sarah signed a contract with an English ship doctor named William Dunlop. He was a friend of Cesar. All she had to do was travel with the doctor to England and Ireland to work as a household servant and be displayed for entertainment. She was supposed to get a share of the money from these exhibitions and return to South Africa after 5 years. Well, this so-called contract had a lot of loopholes. First, Sarah couldn't read or write. She came from a cultural tradition that didn't keep such records, so she had no idea what she was getting herself into. Secondly, the family that brought her was low on money, so there was a high chance that they wanted to use Sarah to make more money. Shortly after she signed the contract, Sarah hopped on a boat to London and never saw her home again. The doctor printed out countless pamphlets and started advertising his latest addition to the freak show. Anyone willing to see this extraordinary woman would have to pay 2 shillings or more and come to Piccadilly. It was one of the most popular destinations for tourists and residents alike. These shows were designed to exploit people with abnormalities or disabilities, like humans with extra limbs, or Siamese twins, giants, dwarves, and people with too much hair were a popular attraction. Some would even tattoo their face to look like Greeks on purpose, or add prostheses to look deformed. But Sarah was real. She was exotic. She was beautiful. She was forced to wear a tight costume, which practically showcased every feature of her body. Men drooled at the sight of her. Women watched in pure shock. They'd never seen anything like her. Her big bum, black skin, and large thighs made Sarah the object of fascination. The colonial Europeans believed they were racially superior, so a body like hers would defy their ideals, visions, and perceptions of beauty. This is why Sarah became an oddity for display. She was placed in a cage that was about 1.5 meters high. While Sarah was working with Dunlop and Hendrik Caesar, the movement against slavery in Britain was gaining momentum. This drew a lot of attention to how Sarah was being treated. Dunlop and Hendrik Caesar were taken to court, but they didn't face any real punishment. That's because during the trial, they showed the judge the contract that Sarah allegedly signed. At the bottom of the contract, there was a statement that said that she wasn't being mistreated. This gave them power over Sarah. Still, her contract was changed, and she became entitled to warmer clothing, better living conditions, and a larger share of the profits. This brings us to another part of today's video, and that is Sarah's later life. In September 1814, after spending 4 years in London, Sarah was taken to France. Here, she was enslaved. When she arrived, Hendrik Caesar sold her to a man named Rowe. Rowe owned a menagerie. Menageries were a popular form of entertainment in the 1800s. They were a sort of cross between a zoo and a traveling fair. Rowe believed Sarah would be a great object for display. See what I mean by object? That's right. They didn't even see her as a person. He paraded her across Paris and made a ton of money from the public's curiosity. He even locked her in a cage next to a young rhinoceros. He hired a trainer who would give her commands like they did with circus animals. He would tell her when to sit, stand, and dance. They wanted Sarah to act like the animals, to make sure she stayed popular. Sarah often had to wear nothing more than a simple tan loincloth. It would only cover her private parts, which were deemed culturally sacred. She was nicknamed Hottentot Venus. The people viewed Sarah's black body as something that could be exploited, violated, and subjugated to inhumane conditions. And according to experts from the University of South Africa, during this period, there is a world order that determines who fits where. And the colonial world is divided in two, those who are at the top and those at the bottom. In Sarah Baartman's case, her dark skin was not the only thing that labeled her as inferior. The colonizers also used the shape of her physical physique to portray her as a lesser being. First, she was treated as an object for examination. She was made fun of and violated. All the paintings and pamphlets they used to make her popular distorted Sarah's story and her features. Secondly, she was forced to work as a prostitute. Sarah became immensely popular in a short period of time. Eventually, she caught the attention of Georges Cuvier, a zoologist and naturalist. He was a leader of elite French science. He was called the founding father of paleontology, basically a rich man with a huge network. Cuvier asked Rowe if he could take Sarah and study her body. He thought she would make a fine specimen. Rowe immediately agreed, and from March 1815, the woman was studied by French physiologists, zoologists, and anatomists, and her body became the subject of scientific racism. Cuvier and his colleagues were curious about whether Sarah had an elongated labia that earlier naturalists like Francois Levaillant claimed to have seen in Coïsson women at the Cape. In March 1815, she was examined at the Jardin du Bois. She was the subject of many different scientific paintings. Now, there are two versions of this story. The naturalists Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire and Frederick Cuvier said she willingly took her clothes off to be painted in the nude, but the other version says that is completely not true. According to Sarah's cultural norms of modesty, it is important for a woman to wear a small apron-like garment that would cover her genitals. Some reports indicate that Sarah adamantly refused to remove it, even when attending scientists offered her money. So, she was probably undressed by force. Cuvier concluded that Sarah was a link between people and animals. This idea was used to promote the false belief that Africans had unusually strong sexual desires and were deemed a lesser race. Records show that many rich people paid to have Sarah at their parties and private gatherings. That's because in Paris, they didn't have to worry about slavery charges. So, by the time she arrived in Paris, her life was miserable. She was treated like an animal. At one point, she wore a collar around her neck. So at the end of her life, she had no money. This was likely because of the economic downturn in France after Napoleon was defeated. So, not everyone could afford to pay to see her. To compensate for the losses, some speculate that Sarah was forced to work as a prostitute, but these are just speculations because there are some reports that she was seen at a brothel in Cours des Fontaines. So, what happened after Sarah died? Sarah Baartman passed away in 1816 at the age of 26. There's not enough evidence about the cause of death. Some suggest she died of pneumonia, syphilis, or smallpox. But what we do know is that even after she died, Cuvier took her body from the local police and dissected it. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the study of anatomy had a bad reputation. Rich scientists would often hire someone to steal bodies from graves to get enough cadavers for research. That's because during that period, knowledge about the human body in Europe was mostly based on manuscripts from medieval Italy and classical Greece. These manuscripts covered information about the dissection of animals or condemned criminals. But as science grew, it was obvious that experts needed more reliable evidence. By the 18th century, charitable hospitals were set up to care for the poor. These hospitals were often run by anatomy schools, where people trained to do surgery and dissect human bodies. Cuvier was a respected scientist who used his influence and network to gain access to Sarah's body. He created a plaster cast, preserved her brain and private parts in jars, and displayed them at the Museum of Man. She was kept on public display until 1974. The poor woman didn't even get a proper burial. Cuvier wrote in his monograph that his subject was a smart woman with an impressive memory, especially for faces, other than her native tongue. She spoke a bit of French and English, and was fluent in Dutch. He said that her arms were slender and her back was graceful. She had pretty feet and charming hands. She also knew how to play the Jew's harp and dance, but he still interpreted her remains based on his theories on racial evolution. He noted that she had ape-like traits. He wrote that her small ears were quite like the ears of an orangutan. When she was alive, he wrote that she had the speed of a monkey. Cuvier was part of a movement of scientists that worked to create a hierarchy of races and place white men at the top. In 1978, Diana Ferris, a poet from South Africa and a woman of Khoisan descent, wrote a poem called "I've Come to Take You Home."
I've come to take you home. Home. Remember the fact. The lush green grass beneath the big oak trees, the air is cool. And the sun doesn't.
In the 1980s, the story of Sarah Baartman gained global attention. The paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould wrote about her in his book, The Mismeasure of Man. He used his work to criticize racial science. After the African National Congress, ANC, won the South African elections, President Nelson Mandela personally asked the French government to return Sarah Baartman's remains for proper burial. This task took 8 years, and the French needed to create a bill that would prevent other nations from making similar claims on treasures held by France. Then, on March 6, 2002, Sarah Baartman was finally returned to South Africa and laid to rest. On August 9, 2002, which is celebrated as Women's Day in South Africa, Sarah was buried at Henkie in the Eastern Cape Province. Sarah Baartman wasn't the only Khoikhoi who was taken from her homeland, but her story is the only one that left a mark on history. It highlights social and political tension. Dr. Yvette Abrahams, a professor at the University of the Western Cape, pointed out that we don't have academic studies that see Sarah Baartman as anything other than a symbol. This is why she has been remembered through the years. Baartman is a symbol of African discrimination. She is one of the many Khoikhois who suffered in the Western world. Yes, girls much younger than Sarah shared a similar fate. Historian Neil Parsons wrote about 2 Khoikhoi children, aged 13 and 6, who were taken from South Africa and put on display at a fair in Elberfeld, Prussia in 1845. Another traveling show called Bosch Gemins had 2 Khoikhoi men, women, and a baby. Their captors toured Britain, Ireland, and France from 1846 to 1855.
Now I got to stop it right there for a minute, because I don't know if I want to cry or cuss, because I'm both mad and sad, even though I've watched this video multiple times already. But the audacity of the French to call this woman's remains their treasures and to create a bill to prevent other nations who they stole from reclaiming the things that the French stole. Now, go back to what was happening last year. Now you see why those other African nations were kicking the French out. See, you know, people talk about America being Babylon, and act like America is the only bad guy on the world stage that does wrong to these other countries. They forget so easily and how quickly, you know, we tend to cast out of our mind the corruption and the evil that birthed America, which came from other countries on the European continent, with France and Great Britain being at the forefront And probably no other European nation has done more damage to the African continent than France, who still holds colonial authority in many places. They have been the number one European country that African nations have been rising up against. And we're in the 2020s now. And the French, that's why when I see tragedies and stuff, now listen, I feel for everybody, but you'll never see me in any of my social media posts with no flag talking about some pray for France. And nobody ever talks about praying for the countries that France still colonizes and exploits when tragedies happen there. And this is kind of inequity that we have going on in our world. This woman was dehumanized, over-sexualized, hypersexualized, humiliated. And even after she was dead, they continued this same cycle of humiliation. And nobody still wants to be fully accountable for them, for what they did, or just admit straight out what they did was wrong. Nelson Mandela, who died recently in history, had to be one of the ones after he had gotten out of prison to help, restore things or get them as right as possible. This late in the game. And we wonder why the world is the way that it is.
Sarah's story became so popular because she was the subject of extensive exploitation and examination, but also because she ended up in the hands of famous scientists and naturalists. She was forced to spend most of her time in luxury houses and private parties. But no matter where she went, she was mistreated even after death. She was brought to the West because of her big bum and thighs. The white people were so impressed with her figure that they wanted to study her reproductive organs. After all, parts of her body were exhibited at the Musée de la Homme for 150 years. But after all that time, she was finally able to find peace. Compared to other stories of slavery and sexual exploitation, that of Sarah Parton stands out the most. The time she spent in London and Paris was so shocking and distressing that it is even hard to imagine what the woman went through. Sarah was the Khoisan from South Africa. She was put on freak shows because of her extremely large buttocks. This also made her the focus of scientists and naturalists in the area. People wanted to study her. They wanted to touch her. She lived in a period where Black people rarely got a chance to live a normal life. During her very short life, she toured countries. She was the subject of many caricatures, pamphlets, and other forms of advertisement. She attracted so much attention that a famous anatomist took her body after her death. It was their studies in inhumane treatment that showcased the true horror of Sarah's life. Her dead body was dissected and studied extensively. Her remains were painted by artists, and she was placed in a museum in France. Do have in mind, however, that most of Sarah's story was written by her captors. So, we don't know the full extent of their brutality. We don't know much about her early life. The good thing is that her remains were finally returned home, and she got the burial she always deserved. What do you think about Sarah's story? Is there something that you would like to add? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to join the movement. We aren't just telling stories, we're changing lives and waking the culture up. The video on the screen shares some more hidden Black history that they will never teach you in school. Look.
So, those are our few videos today. For reaction's sake, what do you all think? The life of Sarah Baartman. You look at this beautiful Black woman taken from her homeland, sexually exploited for others' pleasure and enjoyment, and none to her benefit. She was duped into signing a contract that she could not read, which was a standard practice of the day, where the Europeans would get people to sign, people of foreign lands and nations that didn't speak their language, to sign contracts that were written in their language, written in English, written in French, written in Dutch, written in Spanish, written in Portuguese. And then they would use these bogus contracts as a means to take the people's land away from them, and even take their lives away from them. They did it to Sarah Baartman. She became a specimen, not a woman who once was married, had a child that she lost, had a family, but she became a specimen to be paraded around. She traveled, but not the way that anybody would want to travel. She traveled as if she was a circus animal. You know, sometimes I look at things like this and I say to myself, you know, I know there's got to be the Elohim in heaven who sits high and looks low. And I believe that all of those who suffered this type of humiliation and injustice will find justice, not in this life, but before the throne of the Almighty and eternal God. Because these kind of things can't happen in our world and never go unaddressed by the Creator, by Elohim. So, hopefully, you know, these things gave us something to think about. So we had some stuff that had to do with modern day as well as historical, and all these things converge at some point, whether you believe it or not. Because you look at the way that Sarah Baartman was exploited, and you see how shameful and how painful and hurtful it is, it ought to make you think of the way that we're now today, especially in the Black community, we're exploiting ourselves. I mean, these BBL surgeries are literally killing women. And they know women are dying from them, and they're still getting them. All these cosmetic surgeries and things that people are doing, rather than just, you know, and I mean, I'm not against all surgery, but some of these things are out of control. When you got to risk your life because your vanity, you know, is out of, you know, unchecked rather. And that's a lot of what it is. You know, and I see it all the time. I just got back from Texas, and we were down there at the water park in different places. And, you know, I didn't expect, I mean, Atlanta, where I live, is the BBL capital of the world. But, you know, I saw something down there in Texas, you know, because they going to see you, even if you ain't trying to see it. Just a few people going to have them, you know. And so, but all of these things, the vanity of these things, people investing more in how they look. And your body is temporary. It's not going to last forever. From the dust you are to the dust you're going to return. And whatever you injected in your body is going to return to that same thing too. Plastic, rubber, silicone, or whatever it is. This life is very temporary. And if you're not working on the salvation of your eternal soul, then you wasting life. And then look at the little boy, RT. You know, his childhood is being siphoned away for the benefit of adults who are making money off of him, but to the detriment of his own spiritual and psychological development. What kind of man will he be if he makes it to manhood? Because the things that he's rapping about aren't the kind of things that most people live through. They die early. You rapping about all this type of violence and mistreatment and ill treatment of other people, and you start doing it at 9 years old, what kind of life are you being set up for? You know, what is to come for this young man? He needs to be covered by prayer, because apparently the parents aren't doing it. The people who are making money off of him aren't doing it. Because if they were, they wouldn't have him doing what he's doing at 9 years old. And then we see also, too, we had earlier about, you know, Black politicians don't necessarily mean that it's going to make things better for Black people overall. A lot of times it just makes it better for the politician or whatever special interest group or political party they're aligned with. You have to make politicians work for you. The basis or foundation for the Black family is and always has been, for the Black community, is the Black family. That's what it is. You know, and that's for any society. I don't care if you're white, Asian, or otherwise. People who tend to have the strongest families tend to do the best overall as a nation because they had the most well-adjusted society. And our society is constantly being attacked and eroded. You see, teachers can't even teach biology anymore. They want you to teach a lie. They're forcing you to tell a lie. You can't even tell the truth. And somebody will get you fired or have you sued because you told the truth. So they're trying to force you to sin, force you to do the wrong thing. And it's going to really take, you know, some real backbone and faith to stand up in these last and evil days. It really, really is. You know, so, you know, we're going to end this real quick with the slides that we have here. And I won't belabor the point because I think we've heard enough. So there's no need for me to do a lot of talking, you know. But as always, you know, we want to at least get one scripture in, and I won't elaborate long. But Acts chapter 2, verse 40, what does it say? And with many other words, he bore witness and continued to exhort them, saying, save yourselves from this crooked generation. You got to take the salvation of your soul very serious. And you got to make that the first priority and put that above everything else. Do not look to the government. Don't look to this society. Don't even expect people to do the right thing because you're going to do the right thing. People are going to be people. And everybody's not going to do the right thing. A lot of people are going to do the wrong thing. Why? Because it's easier to do the wrong. It's easy to do the wrong thing. It always has been. It always will be. And people take the easy way out all the time. And that's why the Bible tells you to make just, it's like getting on that airplane. If there's a problem or it starts to go down, they tell you to put your mask on first before you help anyone else. And that's the same instruction that the Bible is telling us right here. You make sure you got it together first. Make sure you're good with God first. Because on your way to helping somebody else, you may not make it. You may end up in front of the Creator. So make sure you save yourself from this crooked generation first. Make sure you make the right decision first. You do the right thing first. And let me tell you something. The world, as bad as it is and as racial as our society is, it's not so much that we got a race problem. It's that we got a sin problem. Because all racism is nothing but a sin. All this excessive lust and hypersexualization is the byproduct of sin. All of it springs out of the same well, and that well is named sin. That's where it all comes from. And Christ came to save us from our sins. And so the Apostle Peter exhorts the congregation of new believers on the day of Pentecost here in Acts chapter 2. And this exhortation still holds true for us. Save yourselves from this crooked generation. You may be the most giving person there is, but when it comes to salvation, you are your own priority. You got to be at the top of the list. You make sure your soul is saved. That's what you got to do. All right. So with all that being said, beloved, we're not always right and others aren't always wrong. And as always, we want to remember the words of Christ in John chapter 5, verse 39. Search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life. They are they which testify of me. And in Acts chapter 17, verse number 11, reminds us to have that good Bible study habit. It says, now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Amen. So you want to have a daily Bible study with yourself. All right. You want to get in that word for yourself. Okay. So it is our intention to be back on track starting next week. So look for the announcements for upcoming Bible classes, which we're going to try to go back to our Monday and Thursday schedule. All right. And you all please keep me in your prayers. So I'm going through something with the Veterans Administration. still that's been going on for a long time. It's just a test and trial that I got to go through. So y'all pray me through, and if you can, say a prayer for me, please don't forget me. All right. If you can bless me any other kind of way, I'll take that too. Send me a red velvet cake or a sweet potato pie. No, I'm just kidding. Don't send me none of that stuff. I need to do some more exercise and lose weight. But in any event, y'all pray for me. Keep me in your prayers, and I'll be praying for you as well. I love you with the love of the Lord. You are the apple of the apple of the eye of the Most High. He's absolutely crazy about you, and can't nothing, no devil in hell or nobody on earth do to stop it. So as always, I pray nothing but the best for the blessed, and truly you are the blessed of the Most High. So until the next time, beloved, shalom.